little bit of a drought, so I'm sorry for that one. But now today we're going to add much more information from it. So first off, let me pick it from yesterday. So what we did yesterday, we refined kind of our design here. And here we took it to the next level, which is this one. And then a little bit of a time skip, because what I did is basically add much more values, add much more, not values but value, adding much more story into that, and much more elements that supports basically the thing. So what we're going to do, I'm going to explain a little bit about architecture decisions in terms of storytelling and how to add much more story. So in terms of story, okay, let me pretend we have only this house, okay? And this house looks kind of boring, okay, a little bit cool because of the shape, but we don't know who is living here or who this guy is. In order to do that, to add story, is we need to add props and destruction to that, because only those two things, not only those two, maybe probably more, but at least this is the two of those things that I could keep up from it. Let me actually, nice. So why is it here? At first off, let we look what we can achieve through story and how we can actually approach our design into a story element with the props and the destruction. The first one is the repetition part. The repetition part is mostly like ornaments and all that other stuff what you usually see in the other type of video game format or board format or the format of those buildings. So these are the repetition type of it, but it is not a story element. So in order to do story elements, is probably we can add much more repetition inside the building, and we need to choose where we add those story elements and those props, especially when it comes to architecture design. Right now what you see here is the folk building what I did last time. I just refined it a little bit, so for you guys it's got much more going to be normal. But anyway, here we can decide now where we can add those repetitions and where we add destruction, because it's up to us how we decide and where it leads the design depending on where you want to go with it. Because is that house being plundered, or is that house make it like that where someone is living there? And through repetition we can actually achieve that, or through story, because story sometimes always thank you that you love the house, but anyway, story makes it way more cool than the actually cool part of it. So it's pretty nice to have that kind of element into that, especially when it comes to the props and destruction part of it. As I said, someone is living here. Let me try and pretend this is a hunter's house. Okay, so we're going to create a hunter's house. So what does he have here? Is it a storage where he stores the food with probably a hunter bow? Maybe I can add a hunter bow somewhere, and then all these other types of ornaments. Maybe there is a huge place about hunter, maybe it's a hunter guild, and we need to build that building based on that. But why is it a hunter build? What do they do here? Probably they prepare something or prepare something, where they go to the wild. It's like a firefighter. I thought about a firefighter as I was writing about hunters and guilds, about hunter guilds. So the next thing, just take in mind that asking questions is the most important thing. So 3 questions. There are always 3 questions. Who lives there? Why? Why does he live there in the house? And for what reason? What has he stored inside of it or outside of it, or how can we build it up into those buildings? Important. Next one is importance of sketching. In order to actually achieve what we actually try to do, especially when it comes to design, the design part of the elements, with that the understandable part of it. In order to do that is, and I repeating that because it seems like some of you people didn't quite catch the reasons why and how we do that. We know we do thumbnails, but in order to do thumbnails, we need to shut down our brain in terms of fundamental and visual library, because this one comes down as an automatic thing. You're going to practice, warm yourself up, and study your fundamentals. But if you think about architecture itself, you need to think like a robot, because later on you understand way more the more you practice 2D to 3D shapes of it. And we translate those shapes and those fundamentals to create faster solutions and create faster ideas. And the best way to create faster solutions and ideas is through thumbnails. But let me try and pretend we're doing freelance and we are not in an in-game house, in-game development of a video game. Where I am in a company, for example. If I'm in a company, I can totally do thumbnails up 10 to 20, 30, but you saw probably not here. Let me just jump down. Yeah, but you probably saw here. For me, as a freelancer, I need to choose it as myself and decide, okay, which one is the best one, which one gives the clients a better solution or a better idea how to grabs it into his project. But that's another story a little bit. I just wanted to pick you guys a little bit up and explain a little bit the thumbnail part. The next one, what we have in our list is actual architecture. What is it in art? It could be 3 things. The first thing is anatomy, which we translate that into structure. This is the actual name of the word in architecture if it comes to anatomy, because anatomy is actually a really organic term of anatomy in human and animals and creatures and so on. But in environment, we say structure to it. And structure could translate to culture really fast and history, so that we don't need exactly how it's working, where you see, for example, the heads, the deltoid parts, then we have this part here. So all of those things, we don't need them. We need at least a grasp, a small grasp ground, where we actually understand what's going through the surface, what it has, actually. So next one is the functional part. The functional part is understanding how it works, and depending on how it works, you can look at to culture and history, because we already know how it works, because of our reference. Understand Based on our reference, we understand immediately how it is. But for the sake of this one, is we should not. It's not about understanding about the history and culture itself. It's about the functional aspect of it. For example, let's look here. This is just a plane with a small brick that I did here. Guess what happens if it's only one brick on the sides of this thing, I do it right now in 3D for you guys to actually understand it way more better. It would fall apart, like in this scene. It would fall down to the ground because there's no second thing that supports it, or not a third thing that supports it. So gravity, if someone sees that your structure is wrong, he immediately sees it, and you can easily spot it. But that rarely happens if we take reference from history and culture and other type of different timelines, It could happen in fantasy or in science fiction, sci-fi. But that only is because maybe it's sci-fi, because we need even though we need a much more logic to add into that architecture in sci-fi, we still have we need to fake this science, and that's the thing. That's the cool part of it. In the fantasy part is, even if it's fantasy, it still has some rules. So keep that in mind if you want to design something in fantasy. It still has some rules, because fire can distinguish water, for example. Try to imagine a character what fights against a guy that has the magic of fire, and meanwhile your character has the magic of water. Both attack each other, and both of them, okay, fire evaporates water, and water, okay, maybe makes distinguished fire, depending how much degree it is. So yeah, keep that in mind. There are some always ground rules in fantasy, at least in some different types of terms. It always has a rule, even fantasy and sci-fi. So take that with a grain of salt, because there is no rule when it comes to make it cool. As long as it's cool, you don't need to add so much understanding into that, logic into that structure. But now we go to the logic part of it. Why does it work? Probably because you see two things, and it's because of gravity. Gravity is the solution part of it. But in order to... No, we are finished, I think. Gravity resolves everything. So the next one is terms of shapes, or shape hierarchy. I call it sometimes shape hierarchy, because there are always three rules which comes into the design, even though we have this one, even in shapes there are three rules, and always three shapes, but splits itself into different parts. Even in perspective, we have foreground, midground, and background. The same thing happens if we try to design a building. When we design a building, we go from down to up, or maybe from up to down, depending how you want it to do, how easy it is. But in my opinion, understand first the ground, how it's built up, and then the middle one. So this is our shape hierarchy, how it could work, And I think, in my opinion, the best thing is to actually split non-stop your things down and simplify it. For example, here for me, we have always start with a big shape and then a small and then a medium one. Then we combine those three shapes together. Think about the top, think about the middle one, think about the ground. Same happens to here. Big, small, medium. Big, medium, small. And then we combine all of those three together and make a really interesting building. It could be cool, it could be not, it could be really boring, or because it's boring and you think it's boring because of history. History is already so much established in our society that we think that it is boring. But it's always cool because who made these ornaments? These Viking or type of ornaments that you see, or maybe the God of War logo. Everyone loves, I think, the God of War logo. And it looks so cool. And what happens if we add that somewhere in our structure? And it's sometimes a small reference towards it, which is really cool. People don't look at it, which is really sad, but at least we do it and we find it interesting. As long as it's interesting. And this is interesting. Would you own a house like that? I will totally do that because I love having it on the mountain. This is the mountain pass, and you just go down and you have your food prepared and so on and so forth. But anyway, let's go back to the shape part. You see, everything works then after that together. And in order to do so, we apply it exactly like that. It's up to you with which part you start, but on that perspective, I started with the ground part, then the middle part, and then the top part of it. And that's how I think both of those I went back and forward, because as you probably see, it's not really well structured or not really well put together, those lines. Let me actually, yeah. In order to add much more creativity into your level is to doing a ton of iterations, or much more a thumbnail process of it. But as I said, as long as it looks cool, or supports something, or it has gravity on it, which these two things are way more or less cared about it, because it is too much of a brain to actually go through it. So we do first one always cool, and it doesn't matter how you paint. You can totally make it really, really bad, a bad drawing, but at least you follow a structure, how it is, and then later on you can define those structures in a complete different way. Maybe this is a kind of a window for the church, and it's completely fine to do that, because then after it I can come here, set everything up. Maybe it's a Chinese building, it has this type of weird structure, maybe a structure down. What's the support of it, because that's what we do now as a second part. This is the support one. It does support here, but it still goes up like this. So this is but is connected together. Just as a small example. So about the next stage, what we're going to do is actually refine a little bit this kind of thing, which I want to add much more story elements into that part. But today is thinking about outside the box, so I I don't really put any reference into that board. I tried to write my own history, you know. Even though I have already established a history, we know, okay, what we need to add, for example, by the old one, which is barrels and all that other stuff. We can totally add also those things into this house. But what kind of house is that? It looks like a guild house or the main hall of the Nordic tribe of thing, but we actually do. So in order to let me try and pretend we did a strategy game, right? We did one building, and I totally decided to go with this one as a building. But then I need it, of course, to fix it again, because I don't like some of the structural elements. It looks really boring, but it serves its purpose. As long as it serves its purpose, then it's totally fine. You can also make it way more cooler if it where the place is, you know, depending on where the place is. For example, if it's on a river and river is floating by, then you can totally add some ground elements what supports basically based on the river. But yeah, let me keep in mind we do a strategy game which is Nordic. And now we add a faction to it, because in strategy games there are always factions. So keep that in mind. So the faction is Vikings. So what we need to do in terms of Vikings, we know for a fact that number one is Folkhaus, where we increase our population. Folkhaus, okay. So we have that one. The second thing, we need to build some workers. I actually played a lot of strategy game in order to think about the game how it could be. So we need a main hall. Main hall. The third thing that we can actually add is a barrack where it's building up your soldiers. Or we can do everything in one thing, but I would not recommend you that one, because then you need to make a way more bigger building, and then you need probably if you try to fit everything in one design. For example, the building is just for one thing. You want to make a strategy game where one object supports everything. That means, okay, maybe I need here a lodge to do, here someone what smiths the weapons, where you increase the attack or the defense of your army. Maybe here behind him a barrack. Then I need to switch the perspective, and so on and so forth. I think you guys probably guess where it comes. But based on that, I can create a much more grandier design. But I would not recommend it only if you do a game where this plays a huge role, that building. So we go back to our barracks, the types of buildings that we need to have in order to actually execute my project. Volkshaus, main hall, barrack for the army, smith, then we need a research facility, a research kind of thing. Maybe we can make it into a shaman house, you know. I can write that down, shaman house. Where he basically you research also, but you also create, if it's fantasy, some magic type of druids, because they always have that. Sometimes, at least sometimes. But yeah, we know that for a fact. We did this one thing. Now I think this one is the main hall. where there are people coming out, so we need to make it much more comfortable. And I think one of the nicest projects is, I think, Strong Cold Crusader, where basically there are people here, sitting around your fire camp and waiting for work. And I think the best way is just having 5 or 4 people always here, which is really nice. Or we can change completely the design decision and don't add anything, but then we need to add some other type of support rules, Maybe this works as a storage room in the same time. It's the main hall and the storage room. Maybe this is where our lords reside, or the main guy, the main boss, And in our gameplay is you need to go to the main hall in order to win the game. So you need to kill him. So this is what we can add in our strategy project. But I explained now about strategy projects. Okay? Strategy projects. But I think now it's the time to explain you guys different ways, and I mean later. I think the next day, and depending how much time I have, I'm going to explain much more about what type of different settings, not settings, but gameplay you can add, and how you can think around it. Because I totally did strategy games, I totally did jump and run games. At least I tried one. The third thing was about an open world, and that's it. So I have 3 types of video games experience. But let we go now back, far more back, because this comes later. I'm going to explain you guys how to warm yourself up. I think warming yourself up is the most important part, and that has something to do with this kind of thing, where you actually add shapes and all that other stuff. It's really important to understand to have a much more groundbreaking reality or a grasp of those things, where you think automatically about those shapes immediately after you have your reference ready. So in order to do that, we need to warm ourselves up and practice those things. There are 2 things to do in order to get ready, where your brain is already comfortable with it. I can now draw totally a building that looks like probably Maya type of buildings, with Quetzalcoatl house, maybe the main house of Quetzalcoatl, which is the snake house. It's a really big temple with a snake on it. We can totally do that, but that comes later, because first off, I'm not going to explain about Visual Library, just this part, right now at least. I'm gonna explain about fundamentals. So ways to practice. I already teach you guys that, but I'm gonna go again over it. So in order to grasp ourselves and warm ourselves up and being comfortable with it, we need to practice very much shapes. 100 of those things, each of them can bring so much value into that, and actually I missed a few. The ellipse part, and then the sphere, in which direction it goes. So these are really essential, and with perspective we can make them way more better. So there are 2 things that I actually told you about: practicing your shapes from 2D to 3D and practicing perspective. And by the way, you can also totally do those boxes in a different type of perspective. You don't need to set up a horizontal line. But that one for the next day, because next day we're gonna do some mood paintings. So mood I'm gonna explain about strategy different types of genres and mood paintings. We're also going to study next day about some different types of paintings, how to study in paintings, because in order to fulfill everything what has to do in shapes, I'm going to go through that. The next thing is about gesture. So many people think gesture, if they think about gesture, they practice all the time this thing, which is the rhythm part and the structural part. But this is not the only thing that you can actually practice in terms of gesture. And by the way, those are, as you guys see, those are characters, but you guys can totally go environment with it. It's totally okay. But here are 5 things that you guys can totally practice each side of it, I mean, each page of it. So you have beans, contour, and by contour I mean basically having non-stop contours into that character, You create your character based on those shapes non-stop. It's way more harder to do that, but at least you understand the kind of negative space that goes into the contour part, because the contour helps you understand a little bit about negative space and where it goes. And that's the thing that you guys totally could practice. About rhythm, too. Anchor points. Anchor points, I think, is also a really important fact, because if I try to make a character, and this, for example, the back part, I set up some points where everything is going to hit that character. And it's then way more easier to actually do that character than after it, as you guys probably see. Because I have those anchor points, I know for a fact that those things are totally right how it works. As soon as you learn where you can set up your points into your character or into your boxes, because as you guys last time saw, I set up some points on my cube, and I do that right now again. And I tried to hit it from outside of it, actually go way more out with it. And I still set up some points. And I still do it here too. I think it's way more here. Okay, nice. Because now I can comment, I can understand the ground part of it, then the up part of it. And as soon as I can hit this one, okay, this seems wrong, but you guys know what I mean. The more you add points, anchor points to your drawing, the easier it is to understand the fundamental part of it. Same for structural thing, but let me actually explain that then later on. Actually, let me do it right now. I have some free space here. So about an environment, of course. My favorite things are to draw plants, rocks, and trees. So I'm going to draw based on contour some big, medium, and small shapes, And this is everything based on contour. Now I try to draw, and that's over 1 page. I think it's way too much. Let's draw another one. Nice. And then add more stuff to it. Maybe a cactus, a weird round cactus. Maybe it has some holes into that. And that's it. So we added everything based on contour. Now it's time, I think, to add rhythm into that. Where you totally see a gesture around it. And based on this gesture, you go from the flow with it. And depending where that gesture leads you, it's literally like a C curve, which is totally nice. We can also do a composition based on that. which is also cool. So that is the rhythm thing. Now about anchor points, and anchor points are really hard, at least a little bit for me. Let me do it also a little bit of Chester, because not only in anchor points, the thing about anchor points, I can totally take this together, you know, there's another point, there's another point, there's another point. I can totally try and understand those things in a 3D kind of way, where everything is structural. That's the nice thing about those things. If you do environment or characters. Anchor, okay, anchor. I'm sorry, I wrote it wrong. I wrote it in German, actually, if I'm honest. Anchor, which is totally weird. Yeah, I forgot the words of it. Thank you, Turk. So the next thing what we can actually practice and warm up is line weights. And in line weight we have a couple of things here. How we can proceed with our lines and how we can do it. I'm gonna do a little bit. I'm going to deep in this one. So about line weights, the way how we actually you execute our lines, and I'm gonna do that totally with a environment or with a prop part, is setting up these points, and these points and actually let me go a little bit through it and then start at one again. Okay, so we have different types of lines. One is your pointy lines, you know, where it's literally gesturized. The other one is going from soft to hard, then hard to soft, then only soft, then only hard. Then we have different types of lines, and that's about having bigger brushes and small brushes. So let me actually add those things here. This is big, this is medium, and this is small. And you stay non-stop in those brush area. You never change it to different sizes. You always know, okay, that's 42. Okay, I'm gonna start with 42. And that's it, because as soon as you break and that's depending into your environment, because let me pretend and draw one here, okay, because as soon as I do that, let's test it out. Which one is it? 42, I think. Yeah, I'm going to try and pretend I draw some environment, okay, but now I'm going to break it, okay. I try to paint. It doesn't work. That's weird. And that's what I'm talking about. It's about the control part of it. Can you control and draw like with that kind of shape from the background, midground, and foreground? Because also you need to keep that in mind if it comes to drawing those kind of parts. It is really hard to draw with big brushes. I completely understand, but if you try to make, for example, a figure or a type of environment thing, you know, a cactus like this one, and then you only need to go small, and I just straight up use soft points. But now you have an easier time with it. But anyway, next one. We have here on this point fat to thin, fat and thin. It goes fat to thin, and then hard to soft. And hard to soft is because of those brushes. This is the most hardest thing to do in terms of line drawing and painting, because these are easy to control, but this one gets harder because it adds two categories into that. and maybe a third one because of the point. And I think this is the hardest one versus the other one. But next one, you can go to thin to fat, soft to hard, fat to thin, hard to soft, thin to fat, soft, hard points. So you can totally do all of this. There are so many varieties, and I also found this one of those. So let me go and try to pretend I do not know based on our points. I'm going to draw a cactus, okay? And I just try to do this one thing together with all of those, okay? And then I actually explain what's happening here. What's happening now, it adds a much more structure towards your painting. The reason why, and this is actually going really, really hard. Going really hard, I don't try to make it better. Soft, okay, nice. Maybe I can totally add another one here. Okay, what you probably saw here, you know, I split my lines. Why did I split it? Because maybe of abstraction, because sometimes it's way more, it shows much more value towards you, and it makes the lines and your eyes rest on your piece if you sketch. It's a nice thing if you draw props and other type of stuff, but I wouldn't suggest you drawing that in terms of company work, you know. It is nice to have that in freelance, but you barely are going to show that. It's just for you to give your brain an impact from your points, where you can probably see a direction, you know, and probably this direction could go somewhere here, you know. I draw another line, another spike key thing, which goes totally here, maybe, or probably this one. This is another route. So we add sometimes point to make it feel much more livable, you know, and add much more towards it. The more you do, and by the way, soft hard, I made a really soft one, then I went hard into that, soft hard again, and we tried non-stop to do that. Probably now I can go here, soft to hard, and so on. I think you guys get me now about the lines, right? And by the way, practice. This is the last thing that I did want to say about when it comes to line drawing, so I'm painting and drawing. Practice with what you love. If you're not, then use taste. And taste is basically the things that you love to draw. What you love to draw. And based on that, I can totally learn my fundamentals about light theory, color theory, and all that other stuff because I love it. And what I mean by loving it, well, basically it means, okay, can you stay for 20 hours in a day on a drawing and be totally comfortable about that and totally chill about that you love it. Because if you love it, you will totally do more than 4 or 5 hours. But your fundamentals are totally breaking it, and that's why. But in order to work better on your fundamentals and your warm-ups is to draw with taste, and then later on we can also create our own taste based on that, because we always hated to do cars. I for example hated to do buildings, but now I'm totally in love with it. Or chess, I totally hate that, but now I'm totally in love with it because I can totally have let me say I love them. Okay, that's what I tried to tell you guys. So now back to the visual part now. There's one all the time some ways to warm yourself up. For example, you can draw still life. For example, a chest, a book, maybe some boxes I see right now, a bag full of cartons, but you basically can burn. And I can totally draw that based on what I see in my surroundings. And then I learn better how to do that. But let me take a step back and see what we can draw. We can draw history, science, fantasy. We can practice those things over and over again for maybe 2 to 3 pages, because practicing and warming yourself up, okay, warming yourself up is just being comfortable around it, and practicing is about, okay, putting those hours into practice and practicing. That's what is practicing is about. I'm sorry if I tried to help you a little bit with words, even though my English is really bad. But anyway, in order to execute all of those things, we need to understand the utilities or the object of it. And the best way to do that is to practicing first off these things: perspective and shape, because it's then way more easier to have it. And by the way, if you guys practicing objects and different types of objects, it's okay to be the worst thing ever. You don't need immediately be a pro at it, because it takes maybe 1 to 2 years, but then after 2 years you have so much visual library. You draw about Maya people, you draw Japanese architecture, or probably some cheetahs in armor, which is really crazy. I never actually saw that. But yeah, anyway, you can totally do that, as I said. In order to practice those, what Visual Library does through practice is gets our lines better. Even though we practice this one too, at the beginning of our first page, this one gets then automatic into our brain. And you basically what practice does, it makes us like a robot. You see, okay, box left. You think about that in your brain, and it makes it automatically all that stuff for you. Then after that, that's why we practice those things. The reason why I explain that is I want you guys to realize that what actual practice means and how long it's going to take you to practice those. You're never going to be able to be a grandmaster in 1 year or 2 months. So it's like conditioning yourself. Yeah, basically. So the next thing, you can totally practice creatures, characters, environments, take from history, take from animals, it doesn't matter. Because the thing about it is, how long do you guys think I practice one thing or study one thing? And how many days do I do that? I totally do one thing in 1 week. I study, for example, one visual library in 1 week and one fundamental in 1 week. I can totally choose one of those things. But then I'm gonna take maybe those 8 to 10 hours. So calculate 10 hours into your studies every day, from Monday to Sunday. Those are 70 hours. You spend 70 hours on your drawing or painting or sketches or thumbnails. And they're totally going to execute and make you guys in a better designer and better guy who draws well, But yeah, what we do is basically try to imagine our brain now. And this is about the part where I explain how visualization and fundamental versus visual, what is it called? Visual library works. So basically, what we always do, we try and fake the knowledge of it. Even though we have a cactus, take this as a reference for it. And this is our study. Studies could be completely different. We can copy that thing, that cactus. And it probably looks like a mushroom here. That's why it has this shape. And we can translate it somewhere else. Probably I can totally add some different kind of spikes here, or smaller spikes here, which totally work. And I spent my time once going complete outside from the study and do my own kind of plant. Or I study, for example, that are different types of plants, and I just look briefly at it. So I'm going to get definitely 50 to 10% of the knowledge what is saved inside of this. So it's totally okay if we try to fake the knowledge in it. It doesn't matter if it's environment, buildings, or characters, because characters, most of the designers draw in shapes. They have sometimes no fundamental knowledge about anatomy sometimes. Or even me, I have no fundamentals in creatures, even though I can totally do that. Why is it like that? Maybe because I studied a little bit of Chester or a little bit of anatomy itself in human form. Everyone has those kind of things, even creatures. Same with environment, but in environment it's actually structure. Even though this is also a structural part, but it's about gravity itself now. And we take these things into and faking those knowledge. This is a much more visual approach into how to understand things visually, because the reason why we do that is after 5 years to probably 20 years, yes, you come back from the team, and let me say the team is Egyptian gods or Egyptian itself. You drew it 20 years ago, between 20 and between 5 and 20 years ago. Then after it, what happens, you remember your practice, the way how your shapes is, and this is what you save in your brain, because you were so focused and so happy with it that it saves your approach. And even though you totally hate it also, it also going to remind yourself of it. It's okay if you totally hate it or totally like it. Doesn't matter as long as you remember it. And this is what Visual Library does to us. This is why we practice. Read, watch some documentary about it, and write things down to actually have a better understanding. And this is why after 20 years, that book what I showed you, I think my first and second lesson, I think it was the second lesson in how to study or how to write things down, or I think that was the first lesson. Correct me if I'm wrong. But what I basically showed you guys over the internet on my webcam was a book, that basically describes different types of columns, different types of how to approach these columns, how I can split down those shapes. And these things are really going to help me then after 10 or 20 years. Even though I didn't practice those things for 10, 20 years, I can come back and practice it again. And after I get the hang of it, but this time, after 10, 20 years, I get a way more faster hang of it. So everything is saved, even though it's totally wrong. But as I said, faking your knowledge. Even though it's totally wrong. But let me stay with you. This part of your brain stores your visual library, versus this the other guy here stores your fundamental part. And these two work so well together. that everything is stuck like your brain, which is totally nice. So the next thing about fundamental understanding how it works. By understanding how it works, as I said before, I think I just go a little bit fast towards it. And let me actually take another thing. Right now I search the right brush with what I wrote. This one seems legit. So about fundamentals and how to how it works, understand how it works. Same thing. Learn, read, watch, documentary, write it down, practicing it, all those things. Even though the practice is the more bigger part, but let me try and pretend we have watched for 2 days and researched only for 2 days. You have everything what you have in your brain, and for the rest of the 5 days in the week, you can actually totally practice your fundamentals and try only to understand it. Even though the picture is not finished, probably it does take a month, or 2 weeks or 3 weeks. It's totally okay if it takes 3 weeks because it's fundamental, and we need to have that totally in our brain. But yeah, it's okay to fake that knowledge, but don't fake it in a way where it's not right when someone is calling you out. I try to fake knowledge because it's way more easier than for me to understand it. It's just a different word what they're using for it. But in the end, you totally then understand fundamentals a little bit faster, even though this part, it works for this part much more as in this part. Because some of the YouTubers what you probably see out there, they try, for example, someone, I just recently watched a video about a guy who actually tells me the main fundamentals, which one is anatomy, which he totally got right, perspective, and what's important, not anatomy, actually everything about lines, weights, line weights, edge control, and then the other part of the fundamental is depth. And I really ask myself, what the heck is he talking about? This kind of thing, but it probably works for him. Maybe he knows it under, I know it completely under a different name, and then I say line weight, or probably a different kind of in term for perspective, which is probably for shortening what he's talking about. Probably it could work, but at least you understand how you fake the anatomy, or you fake your the things that goes around it, because we have different kinds of jobs. We have, for example, that we try and pretend I'm not a concept designer, and right now I'm an illustrator. My job is not totally to learn those with perfect crazy lines, Actually, I need to do that. I need to understand and get a grasp of my my fundamentals instead of my visual library, of course. Meanwhile, in concept art, visual library is key elements, but I need to focus on around of that. Let me try to pretend I'm an animator. I need to understand everything frame by frame, how the gesture works, how you can practice those things in terms of gesture, That's the thing about any animation or background design. As a background designer, I need totally do millions of mood paintings. For example, this is key in terms of background design. It's just an example what I give you guys. But I think you guys totally understand me when I say, okay, what's that, right? that because every job has different requirements, and depending on what you do, you can actually execute those in terms of warming yourself up in different ways. For example, as an animator, the most important thing is actually having gestures or warming yourself up with frame gestures. Versus let me try and pretend we have different types of sections. The concept artists in terms of characters need to do a ton of gestures, warming yourself up with gesture. Versus my type of thing is warming myself up with those things, which is totally fine. Yeah, I think we we did we covered a little bit much more about fundamentals and Visual Library and how to practice those things. The next part, and that's after the break, I going to refine this one here, and we talk about, I think, importance of thumbnails a little bit, because this is I think a really important thing to cover it up. So yeah, a 5-minute break. So see you guys. So, I'm back. So in case, let me just find my pen. Okay, nice. So, importance of thumbnails. Why the heck do I write an S? So, importance of thumbnails is the team. So, let me get straight to the first main point, which is actually exploring ourselves into the thumbnail process. In order to create different kind of ideas, we need totally to execute a couple of things, which is probably the man. How should I explain that? So let me go first off with why we do things in thumbnail format. Maybe because it creates much more ideas, and it actually totally does. It creates way more ideas, way more fast on paper, and we fake the design of it. This one, for example, this is the main hall, and that we try and pretend our art director told us we need totally to do and create a main hall. Okay, the main hall, or probably the main hall is already finished. I totally did and set up my 20 designs and chose 5 to probably 6 of them, which goes into the concept phase. And I showed them to the director or to my client. And then after that, he says, "Oh, really nice. I really like those. We can totally go for it." But then I show much more than it, because maybe he goes to a fantasy project, you know, guys, and going to different types of things, because what I want from my client is to give him much more value than he actually is, and probably maybe this thing that I do right now, he gets a way more better idea how to execute his project much more into his way, And what I mean into his way, where basically, if his project is a really ground reality one, and probably he can add different types of factions, so I make probably a really high advanced fantasy thing. But then what if his project, he really likes those and he wants to dump it later down to a different artist, and this artist dumps it way more down for his type of project, And that totally could happen, but it's happened really, really rarely. So that usually that happens only if you walk into the company itself rather than freelance. But it's a nice thing to think about it. At least if you bring something up to the table and actually help the project going forward, because as soon as you get a monthly payment for him, he will totally work with you much more in the future relation with you. And that's, I think, it's one of the most important things when it comes working with clients and setting really fast those things up for the clients in terms of thumbnail process. So what I do right now, I think I refine it just a little bit to the point, at least this building, a little bit to the point where, because everything is refined, it looks like a normal building but has doors and tree and other type of things. Maybe I can add here ornaments. It's really hard to talk about it because it's hard to talk meanwhile trying to explain something about thumbnails, and at the same time figuring all of those stuff out, because right now we just try to make it cool, That's the problem of if it comes to teaching and try to explain. I do 3 things in the same time, and that's the problem. So I'm sorry guys if it comes to such a delay, or it takes me maybe 5 to 10 seconds to think about it, because it's a really hard topic, and it's a hard topic to grasp of it. But I think we should. I think the refinements. I just refine it a little bit based on making it cool, making it understandable. This one leads to this one. Okay, nice. Maybe I can put one here. Nice. Okay, we go here down with it because this is the functional part of it. Design. Oh, probably I can set it totally up here down, and then it reads way more better. So I have this part here. Nice. And then I cut it from here and make probably a complete different design here. I add much more cool into that design. It makes and helps to read a little bit better. The first thing is, okay, I add this part here because I added it also here, so it needs to be on the opposite side of it. I try to focus on the top first because, in my opinion, this is the only thing that I need to refine a little bit much more, and try to add a couple of things that could probably look cool, because what kind of material is it? And that's the thing that I ask myself, at least after the thumbnail process right now. We don't try to generate things here. The best way is, after that we're going to do some much more thumbnails about the main hall or a different type of building. Okay. Or probably we can take a step back and try to explore much more our shape design, because as long as we set up 20 or 30 things, and you want to design that, you can totally design maybe 50 things, 50 things each day, and you have in the end of the week over 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 30, 35, 34, 36, okay, 40. So 400, about 400 each, 400 each building. If you planned it to do it for an entire month and each week, you have 400 of main halls and 400 of different types of designs, but probably we can morph it into a different thing, which is totally nice. Try to be loose in your thumbnail process. Don't overgo with it, because if you try to make a spaceship, okay, let me say that I just set up some lines here, then I totally try to create different types of shapes here. Add it much more cool into that design. Probably I can, if my Photoshop would understand me. I just try randomly to put some designs, because this could look like a fish, Based on that, I can totally go with it. And this is probably that part where, for the jet, it's probably for the jet part, I can totally do a jet part here. And then maybe here the cockpit, and so on and so forth. And I can generate much more of it, that we try something different. Maybe an insect, a type of bee spaceship, where basically it has maybe a ball here, and this is the cockpit, the ball. So it's a small type of insect spaceship. Not spaceship, but fighter. Which actually creates way more value. Way more better things into our project. And this is really nice to have it 50 times, and then later after the next week you refine those, then create another 20, then refine those, create another 20. So it's really nice to have that in our process when it comes to creating type of stuff. I actually really like that beetle one. It looks really cool. Probably I can do here the cockpit. I can totally change that into a different thing. You see, that's the variations what I'm talking about. Probably I can add, then I can explain maybe the cockpit part, copy that over. If here the client decides to move on and chose this one design, and he asks me to do a concept, I can totally do that. Make the cockpit bigger, then research some reference out how you can make the cockpit, yeah, and that's all about it. You try to make people way more understanding towards the part what goes into that, Here's the cockpit, here's probably the chair, and there's probably a guy here. Okay, nice. And then we have this part. It goes down. Probably some lights here, maybe it's dark. In the dark he needs to see. And so on. I think you guys get what I mean with the thumbnail process, right? Because later on, as I said, I can turn it into a concept. The same thing happens here. We chose, for example, this thing from here, from this thumbnail. I just added another thing here, right? I just took this one and made it way more better than it actually is. Added story, much more value towards it. I can make totally here, for example, a window, it's probably open really up. Then after that we have this. We could totally turn that in a different type of medium. The only thing what we need to do then after that, even though it's for strategy game, what happens if it's open world? I need only to design the inside of it. But we have already the whole entire building, and that's the nice thing about it, I think. So, I think it's already done. I made everything what I really need. Some boxes here, probably. Maybe some fireplace for the main hall. What else? What can we add? Maybe a shield. Because it could be like guild, So that's the thing what I try to encourage you guys to do too, Try to understand what kind of building it is and for what type of game. If it's just for interaction the game, for example, we take The Witcher, I totally need to Google that now. Witcher 3 White Orchard. Not orchard. We can totally go to image. Location. Not location. Merchant. Inn. Let's look at the inn. So the purpose of this building is just to introduce our world. This game is trying to tell us with this building that it's only going to introduce ourselves into this world. That's it. And you see how wrong it looks. It has this kind of shape, this weird shape. So it's totally a normal boring inn. It doesn't look like an inn, probably, okay. But at least people understand, okay, probably with this kind of thing, with this kind of stuff here around, maybe there are some horses, that probably could look like an inn, or it's written here on that shade, and that tells us basically, okay, it's an inn. So we don't need crazy details to do that, at least not that type of medium where everything is realistic, right? Because even as we see it as boring stuff, it serves a purpose. And there are probably a couple of variations, just a couple of one, based on history. They totally took it from history, just drew it, over it, had just a few things. And that's what I did here, with our last design. I just added a few stuff over it, and that's it. But this one looks like refined wood, versus this one, I can totally do hay over it, or another type of thing, I can totally add this stuff, which actually gave me an idea. Dump everything down. Because it's Viking. It's not that crazy. Yeah, this one could be too, Dump everything down. It's absolutely okay to do that. We don't do cool design, we do understandable design. And as long as it is understandable, as long as it serves a solution, our job is to resolve a solution into our game. And I think this serves it very well. Probably the design is a little bit too much because I went a little bit overboard, but sometimes this happens. I can totally do, for example, a thing that shows to north, northeast, and probably a chicken here. Could totally do that. I could totally do that. Or I can put it here down, and probably here, because it's the main hall. Not a clock. A clock is too much, I think. Just simplify everything. We just try to not make everything really good established, Because sometimes it's absolutely fine if it's not good established. So the next thing, White Orchard, is really interesting because not only, and that's based on medieval stuff, it has so much value. And this is design outside in, and what I mean outside in is that form follows function and function follows form. This is function follows form. Why is it function follows form? Well, maybe because this is an inn. This is where your horse is going to be stored. This is for the chicken, a chicken farm. This is a normal village house, another village house, another one. Different types of trees. You see actually a direction non-stop. Doesn't matter where we read it. This is the design. Function follows form versus, and I go to ArtStation. This is the thing that we most produce in our concept art. I just wanted to show you guys that because I think it's really important to actually address that. Let's look at some environments. Okay, I think it's really important to actually keep that in mind. This is for a movie or animation. Let's add 2D, not illustration. No environment. I need environment. Can I write somewhere environment? Oh yeah, here. Environment, consider environment. Even though This is totally okay. This is function follows form. Function follows form. Function follows form. Yeah. This is probably what form follows function is. And we do that non-stop. Even though it's nice for mood paintings, you know, you try just to figure things out in the pipeline production. But it only serves one purpose, to show you this cool building. That's it. To show you this area. But we cannot describe what all of those building does and where it goes. There's somewhere a path, yeah. But then you see here, this path, you can probably see maybe where it goes, but you can just probably hint at it. I think maybe it goes, and I set it up on blue for you to make it much more understandable. Probably here on blue part, probably here, probably all of these things is the path, and that's the problem of it. Here we see a crazy path. We know exactly what this building does, this building, all of those farms. You see a chicken around, you see all of those things. And this is what I'm trying to tell you guys, that form follows function, because we designed this one from outside in, versus this one inside out. This is what I usually talk about when I say outside in design versus outside inside out design. So at least you guys understand now what I meant when it comes to designing those parts, because I think it's really important to keep in mind what all of those things does, okay? I think we are done here. Today, I think I not give you any homework, because it's just practicing those stuff. I just explained about practicing those architecture, and we just made it simplified. And I think I'm going to refine that a little bit at least, and design a little bit out of it. Then the next day we're going to learn about study paintings, but we approach it in terms of drawing, you know? You have your big shape, your middle shape, and your small shape. But this time in terms of drawing, you know, we draw those parts. Because imagine this, if we draw an object like this, you know, this is a cube, everyone understands it, but then it gets smaller. And we don't need to zoom in to actually explain those parts, and smaller. And this is how we usually paint those things. We just take a bigger brush to draw. We are basically drawing those, but only our limitations is that we need some fundamentals, you know, which is light theory and color theory. Probably I'm going to teach you also about color, light theory a little bit, and how to study those kinds of things, because the refinement process is a little bit required to actually do that. But it's okay if you guys don't do it, because we paint under this kind of element, you know, not over it. A little bit over it, maybe, but we still try to keep it. We try to make an amazing design, best portfolio ever, okay? At least this is what I try to do with you guys right now. So where we are. The next thing, next day, study paintings. I wrote it wrong. Painting. Light theory. And that's a maybe. Maybe I'm going to teach you because some people made some mood boards about open world, and I need to cover that. So based on what you guys decided, I'm going to cover that, guys, for you, okay? But yeah, study painting, light theory, what else? Thumbnails, paintings. And we go the simple route. We try simple and then the hard stuff. This is also a little bit of a requirement right now if you guys want to go crazy with your colors and with all that other stuff. And by the way, maybe color theory. Color theory is a little bit of another thing because it really depends. I really want you guys to draw right now in black and white, maybe. And what I just usually do, I pick colors and just draw with them. I never actually learned about color theory, even though I know exactly, okay, that picture needs to be vibrant, that picture needs to be not so vibrant. I add specific kinds of colors depending how I do that. Kalantrankas teaches stuff like color theory. Can never write his name correctly. Okay, then probably you guys going to learn a little bit, at least a little bit about light theory next day. So we have all those three things together. We're going to have a ton of stuff. And how to study, yeah. Study paintings. That's the thing. And then the next one is thumbnails painting. I hope you guys learned something, at least a little bit. I'm sorry if it was not really informative and I covered the last day up because I was yesterday a little bit in a drought. And yeah. Getting overwhelmed from photos, yeah. That's one of the reasons why I want to study that with you guys. And it's going to be then a way more easier way to learn that, because how we need to treat it is we need to build it up based on shapes and not get overwhelmed with it, because there's a lot of colors going on. So yeah. Anyway, I hope you guys had a lot of fun and a lot of constructive understanding about it. If you guys want, I can look at the VCR private. None, I think your class might be clashing with Soul's class on Friday. Might want to check up on this like back on Friday. Okay. I actually, let's see what you guys did. Nee, LTN. I just say LTN. I'm sorry that I butcher your name right now. You did really well with it. That's amazing that you did some thumbnails. But right now, I think the time for you is to practice different kinds of elements. Practice the same thing what Fable did. You need to practice volume and other type of stuff, and a little bit of weight, line weight, But I actually practice here. We just need to add those stuff into that. Okay. So as long as then you later on understand what happens, then you can have an easier approach and way more better line quality with it. Your job is only to practice. That's the thing, what it is, and then practice a little bit of fundamentals, and then you have it. And but I say then you have it was basically what I mean with it. It takes you a little bit of 6 months, maybe month, to actually execute that. So don't worry about it. It takes a lot of time to do that. So, but okay, I think we are done.